Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today this is a video about emergency engine control for the EC135, mainly the spherical bearing. The purpose of me making this video is I've noticed that a lot of these are bad on the machines that I look at. I don't think people actually look at this, so I just want to bring it to people's attention. Also, we're going to go over the maintenance manual, when we're supposed to look at this, what the limits are, and briefly over the inspection of the whole emergency engine control. After that, we're going to go over the replacement of the spherical bearing. It's not a big deal. There's a couple things that are not in the maintenance manual, or the maintenance manual actually isn't very clear about, but it's not a huge deal, honestly. If you read the maintenance manual, you could figure it out. Just a couple cautions and notes that aren't in the manual that I'll bring to your attention on this video, all right? Do that again. Okay, so here's a look at the number one engine, the left side. This is on a Pratt & Whitney. It's the spherical bearing is the same for the turbo Meca engines, but this video is the Pratt & Whitney engines. So this is on the left side. Looking up, you just open the cowling, you can look up, you can see it right here on the left. Okay, this is the fuel management module. Right below that is your emergency engine control, and right here is your spherical bearing that we're going to be talking about in this video. Why do we use the emergency engine control? Oh, let's just think about that. Oh, in an emergency. So how often do they twist the throttles, twist the twist grips? Never, unless it's an emergency. So if you have an emergency and you go to use it and this thing is wore out, like, and this thing is wore out pretty good, then they're not going to have as much accuracy on their twist grip as they should have. That's my understanding. All right? And you'll never know it until you need to use your throttles in flight, okay? So take a look at it right here. It's wore out, and we'll move forward from there and take a look at everything else. Where do we find the inspection? Well, it's AMM, the Aircraft Maintenance Manual, 761200-6-1. That's the inspections of the emergency engine control. We're not going to go over the whole thing. We're looking at Pratt & Whitney. When do we do this? When is the inspection for this? Well, it's the periodical. That's the 1,000-hour, 3-year, all right? There's a couple notes through all of this I need to clarify a little bit, okay? So right here, it says note, the freedom of movement of the emergency engine control is checked by turning the respective twist grips of the collective lever. Okay, simple enough. In helicopters with dual controls, the collective lever of the co-pilot is also equipped with a gearbox. The connection between both gearboxes is established by 2 additional ball bearing controls. Okay, so look, this is something that we need to think about. When they say dual control is optional, yeah, either your aircraft has the fixed provisions for the dual controls or it doesn't. They're not saying that you have the co-pilot collective and the co-pilot cyclic installed. They want to know if your aircraft has all the other stuff installed, all right? That's something that a lot of people, I think, miss on some of the other requirements. That's not a big deal right here, though. Anyway, we're going to just the inspection of the emergency engine controls. And mainly what this video is about is this part right here. It says inspect engine input linkage at engine 1 and engine 2 for condition, freedom of movement, and correct attachment. It says look in the area of the engine input linkage. Check the spherical bearing of the ball bearing control through which the ball bearing control is attached to the bracket for excessive play. If the axial play is greater than 12,000ths of an inch or 0.3 millimeters, replace the spherical bearing. And we're going to go over this chapter right here, 761200-8-1. But there's a couple other things that we need to go over while we're in the inspect the emergency engine control section. All right, this one I think gets overlooked. I've overlooked it, my bad, but this is all on the periodical, okay? While you're inspecting the emergency engine control, they want you to push back the bellows that's up on the engine side, right, like close to the engine. Push it back and examine the ball bearing control for contamination and lubrication. If the ball bearing controls are contaminated or dry, do the following. Okay, they want you to clean it with acetone. Look, you're going to have to move the manual. You're going to have to twist the throttles back and forth to get it extended as you can to clean it. Anyway, they want you to clean it with acetone, and then they want you to apply grease, it says, CM148 to the ball bearing control. That's the inside of it at the engine input linkage. But it also says the alternate is CM506. All right, so CM148 is Ardrox 397/1 HP. I don't even know what that is. Maybe I've had it around one time or another. I don't even know. The alternate you can use is CM506. Well, CM506 was replaced by CM531. And CM531 is Ardrox 396/1 E8. I have no idea what that is, okay? But order some up when you're going to do your periodical, because this is part of the periodical, all right? All right, we're moving on. This is what this whole video is about right here. It's the replacement of the spherical bearing. Mainly this video is about you need to look at the spherical bearing, and it'll probably be wore out if you haven't looked at it and your aircraft has tons of hours on it, okay? Anyway, replacement of the spherical bearing on the emergency engine control, AMM 761200-8-1. This isn't like complicated, but there's a couple things that you could overlook, all right? All right, first thing, if you look at the consumables, what is this one? CM683 is Loctite 242, and Lockwire CM776 is 32 thousandths of an inch, all right? All right, we're not going to go line by line over everything, but we are going to go line by line on a fair amount of this. But at first, they want you to pull a bunch of breakers. Obviously, you got to take the cowlings off and the firewalls off to get access to what you're going to be working on here, which is the emergency engine controls. The left side isn't too complicated. The number 2 side, the right side, is on the inboard side of the aircraft. So you have to get some of that firewalls off on the inside, like the tunnel and stuff. No big deal. It tells you to do all that. All right, but the part that matters, starting with us, is it says ensure that the twist grip engine 1 and 2 on the collective lever are locked in the neutral detent position. That's not a huge deal right now. You're going to be moving that throttle around anyway, because you're going to have to make sure it functions correctly when you hook it back up, okay? So it's not the end of the world. Okay, here it says loosen screws 2 and nut 1. Well, yeah, loosen and remove them, all right? And they're what holds the spherical bearing onto that support piece. You have to disconnect those first thing. Next thing you got to do, remove the circlip number 5 and pull off the elbow connection. They call this multiple things, but it's the elbow connection. It's the end of the engine control, all right? Remove it from the ball pin of the engine input lever. Not a big deal. Take that clip off. It says remove spherical bearing together with ball bearing control assembly. It's the whole thing. The whole end right there, the whole assembly. You just pop it out, pop it down, and you'll disconnect it from the support. Yeah, the more I look at this, the more like wonky it is. They don't really talk clearly here, or the translation isn't well, okay? Right here on E12, it says loosen nut 6 and screw it off the ball bearing control together with the elbow. Look, you can't just loosen that by hand. That thing's held on by Loctite first thing, and it's up against that number 7, which is the aft spacer nut. It's those 3 things are stuck together. But number 6, which is the jam nut, is held on with Loctite. So you can't just loosen the nut and screw it off, or unscrew it, screw it off. That doesn't sound right. So anyway, so you're gonna have to finagle this. There's another thing. You can't just go ahead and say, oh, well, I'm just going to like start reefing on this thing with my wrench. That's on the inside of the ball bearing control. If you start twisting on that with your wrench, you're going to wreck that ball bearing control, and you're in for a crap ton of work, dude, trying to replace that thing. I've never done it. I've heard it was a nightmare. Okay? So if you need to, obviously, okay, so look, you could put your wrench on number 6, put another wrench or like a Nipex or pliers on number 4, and you could break it loose. First, you got to back off number 7. Not a big deal. All right? There's also like a spot in the inside of the ball bearing control, number 9, where you could put a wrench on. But I think right now, if you held number 6 and tried to back off number 7, which is the spacer nut, then you can get a wrench on number 6 and like a wrench, like an open-end wrench on number 4, or like a Nipex pliers or something like that, and you could crack it loose. But you don't want to twist the inside of that ball bearing control, which all of this is connected to at this point, okay? All right, so the next thing it says is remove both tie wraps from the bellows, number 10. They call the other thing the bellows. The other thing is not the bellows. I don't know. We'll go over that again. you would have already removed the tie wraps and tried to move this bellow around to get some space to it, you know, to get up, to be able to get access to what you're working on. Oh, again, screw off bellows together with forward and aft spacer nuts. No, you're not going to do that. That just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, you already have number 4, which is the, what do they call that? The armpit, the arm, the, I don't know what they call that damn thing. Elbow. You've already removed the elbow connection, number 4. You've already loosened up and removed number 6, which is the jam nut, and you can just take off the aft spacer nut, which is number 7. Okay, now you can take off the bellows, and now you can unthread number 11, which is the forward spacer nut. Cool, that's done. Next. All right, right here is pretty important. I marked it in red, E15. It says, on the threaded sleeve of the ball bearing control, that's the outer side, that's the front part of it, the outside of the ball bearing control that goes all throughout the helicopter. It says, on the threaded sleeve of the ball bearing control, mark the position of the forward face of the forward nut, number 14, in its jammed position against the spherical bearing. All right, this is important. So like right here, I just put a Sharpie. I marked the nut. I marked on the ball bearing control, on the outer piece of the ball bearing control. And then somebody was like, yeah, when I do it, I just put masking tape on it. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I did that too. Anyway. And there's a note right here. It's note 1, and it's right on that nut. Anyway, it says, before disassembly of the control mechanism, mark the setting position of the forward nut on the threaded sleeve of the flex ball using suitable paint. Cool, done. Because that's pretty much your rigging, okay? Then it says, remove lock wire number 17, which connects nuts 14 and 12. And then it says, loosen forward nut and aft nut, and unscrew and remove aft nut from the threaded sleeve of the ball bearing control. All right, well, we're not going to do that, okay? There's a spot on the, what do they call it? On the threaded sleeve of the ball bearing control where you can put a wrench, like an open-end wrench, and you're going to hang on to that outer sleeve because you don't want to twist that either. And then you're going to loosen up number 12. You're not going to put a wrench on number 14 because you don't want to move number 14. Number 14 is what is setting your rigging position, all right? They don't ever call it rigging, but that's what you're doing. All right, great. At this point, you could remove just pull off the spherical bearing from the ball bearing control. Just slide it off, and you could take it apart. It's just like the ball pivot on the tail rotor control. It's just smaller. It's probably all jacked up. If it had that much play in it, I don't know. I have probably 10 of them just because, I don't know, I collect garbage, I guess. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, all wore out, just sitting there shaking around with that oil in there. It just screws it all up, right? Not a good place, and especially if no one ever looks at it. All right, the next thing they want you to do is inspect the ball bearing control, blah, blah, blah. If it's damaged, you got to replace it. Got it. Ensure correct functioning and smoothness of movement of the ball bearing control of the emergency engine control by turning the corresponding twist grips, engine 1 or 2, or 2, right? So now you're going to move the twist grips around and make sure it's smooth. If it's not, then change your ball bearing control, which would suck bad. All right, here's a note. It says, for the installation of the spherical bearing, the twist grips, engine 1 and 2, must be locked in the neutral detent position N. Look, that's not a huge deal right now. It is when you hook it up. And in the end, it doesn't matter because you're going to functionally test the emergency engine control anyway. Maybe it is with Turbo Meca, but it's not really with Pratt and Whitney, so not a huge deal, but just keep it all in neutral anyway, right? All right, now we're going back together with this thing. It says, screw the forward nut back to the position marked previously. Well, you shouldn't have moved the forward nut 14. If you did, move it back to where you marked it. All right, then it says, slide the new spherical bearing and jam it by tightening the aft nut 12. While doing this, hold the forward nut 14 so that its position on the threaded sleeve of the ball bearing control remains unchanged. Yeah, not too hard, okay? Just put the spherical bearing on, push it up against number 14, screw on number 12, make sure 14 doesn't move, and then we'll move forward from there, okay? All right, screw the forward spacer nut 11 screw it on there until it abrupts. I'm sorry, until it abuts the aft nut 12. Got it. That's just a spacer like nut anyway. That's what your bellows gets zip tied to. And look, the thing is too, man, you're just gonna have to torque up those two nuts. They tell you to do that way later on, like at the very end. But torque it up, and if you have to loosen it up, you might adjust this thing like 2 or 3 or 4 times. It's just the way it is, all right? Anyway, it says slide the aft end of the bellows forward and hold it in this position. Well, just put the bellows on now. It's just going to be flopping around. Anyway, aft spacer nut 7 isn't threaded all the way through. It's only threaded halfway, and then the other half is a little bit wider. It's so that you could thread it all the way down the flex ball control. You just thread it all the way down, and it goes further down because you want to ensure that number 4, which is the shoulder piece or whatever they call it, the elbow. When you put the elbow on, it goes all the way down, but that's further on. So anyway, the point is they're telling you to put number 7 on. They don't tell you how to put number 7 on. So the part that has no threads goes on first. Screw on the aft spacer nut number 7. Screw it on the correct way, like I just showed you in the pictures. Then screw on nut 6. Well, nut 6 is covered with Loctite from before, so it's not just going to thread on. Like, it's not going to just thread on. You're going to have to counter hold the inside of the ball bearing control, that rod, like I showed you on that small end. There's a cutaway. You can put an open end wrench on there. You need to hang on to that, and then you need to thread that down all the way. You need to thread number 7 down, which is the aft spacer nut, all the way down. Then you need thread number 6, which is the jam nut, all the way down. It might be hard to do because it probably has, old Loctite on it. All right? Right now, this is important. It says screw the elbow, which is number 4. Number 4 they call the ball stud. Anyway, that's what it is. Screw the elbow onto the ball bearing control until it reaches its stop. Screw it all the way in. Once you screw it all the way in, they want you to turn it 1.5 turns back again. It says, take care that the elbow connection is aligned such that it can be later connected to the engine input lever. Okay, I failed to tell you at the very beginning, mark or eyeball which angle your elbow is. Once you got it disconnected and it's hanging out there straight, remember what angle it is. Or right on there. You can't really write on there. Kind of eyeball where it's at and try to remember where it's at. If not, you're going to be putting this thing and hooking it back up 2 or 3 times and readjusting that elbow end. That's why they're telling you right here. It says screw it all the way in, and then you could turn it back 1 to 2 turns. That's enough for you to align it. I hope that makes sense. All right. So you can align the elbow onto the ball stud of the FMM, the fuel management module. Okay, you don't want to hook it up and have it be all cockeyed, have it be all up against that the control for the FMM. All right, you want it to be level. So once you screw this down onto there, hook it up, hook the whole thing up, like line it up. Put the bolts that hold the ball pivot on, the spherical bearing onto the support, and attach the elbow to the fitting on the fuel management module on the bottom, and see if it's lined up. If it's not, pop it off, loosen up the jam nut, and tweak it so it's straight. All right. Otherwise, you might as well do that now. It tells you to do it later, but we're going to do it now. All right. Maybe I got ahead of myself. Anyway, it says jam the elbow connection in its correct position using that jam nut I was talking about by using the torque tightening the nut of super small torque, 9 to 17 inch-pounds, which is like nothing. While doing so, hold the elbow connection with a suitable tool to prevent it from turning. Secure the nut with lock fluid on the ball bearing control with the threaded fittings. Okay, so obviously you're going to put Loctite on the threads while you're screwing it down onto the elbow fitting. Make sure the elbow fitting doesn't turn. Make sure it's in the correct position, right? It doesn't say to check it at the end. It's just something you want to make sure it gets done correctly, okay? Right after you have the jam nut on, it says screw back the aft spacer nut and jam it hand tight against the jam nut 6. Well, you're not just going to do it hand tight. Like If you do it hand tight, it's just going to become loose, but it's not the end of the world anyway. So I don't know. I just snugged that thing up a little bit. No worries. All right, now you could hook up your bellows over the forward and aft spacer nuts. You could put zip ties on it. It doesn't tell you to put zip ties on it now because you might need to make some adjustments. So hook everything up and see if it fits. All right, so now we're hooking it up the way they want us to. It says, note, for the connection of the elbow connection to the engine input lever, the engine input lever must be in the locked neutral position, and your throttles have to be in neutral position. So the engine input lever is in neutral, and your throttle position on your collective twist grips is in neutral. Press the ball stud onto the ball-ended pin of the engine input lever and secure it with the retaining clip. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated. Well, it doesn't. There's a huge paragraph here. Pretty much what it's saying is attach the spherical bearing to the support. The spherical bearing goes on the front side of the support. If it doesn't fit easily, then you need to adjust those jam nuts, 14 and 12. Okay? It should fit. I mean, you didn't move anything, all right? So hook up the elbow to the ball pivot. Hook up the elbow to the engine input lever ball. Lock it all in place. Everything's in neutral. And then number 13, the spherical bearing should fit on the front side of the support. Okay, the front side. All right, great. Attach the spherical bearing by means of screws and nuts, which are bolts actually, support to the support. Torque tighten the nuts to 36 to 44 inch-pounds. Sweet. Okay, the next thing they say is using tie wraps, secure the bellows front end and back end to the front and aft spacer nuts. While doing this, take care that the bellows are not twisted. Yeah, okay. Then it says press all circuit breakers in the overhead panel if you previously pulled them. Perform a functional test of the emergency engine control. And we're going to go over that in a different video. All right, I'll link it to this one because it's actually super simple. They want you to flip a bunch of switches, twist the twist grips, and make sure that the FADIC goes into manual mode and that it says manual mode and twist grip when it's supposed to. That means it's rigged correctly. All right, but I'll make another video on that. The maintenance manual on Airbus just wasn't working out tonight anyway. It's just 10 more minutes of the video, and this is going to be a long one, even though it shouldn't be, right? All right, now they want you to torque those two nuts. Everything's installed, so now you have to torque those two nuts. Not super easy on the number 2 engine. Not the end of the world, though. 32,000 safety wire. Ensure the twist grips, engine 1 and 2, are locked in the neutral detent position N. Secure the outer bellows. Oh, see, this is not right here, okay? They're talking about number 16 in this picture. This is just saying, hey, hook up all your firewalls and stuff and secure that. They call it a bellows. It's not a bellows. It's just that firewall fabric that's connected to the outside of the emergency engine control, which is forward of the engine firewall. It's in the transmission area, all right? Not a huge deal. Just the wording isn't right. Maybe it's translation. I don't know what it is, but sometimes when you read this, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm just trying to make this a little bit clearer for you guys. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's it for the video. That wasn't complicated. I just want to make sure that you guys take a look at the spherical bearing on your engine controls, on your twist grip throttles that you never use, only in emergency. And I'm telling you, a lot of them that I look at recently in the last year or two have all been screwed up. I'm just trying to spread the word. If you're in a periodical or you're in a big inspection, knock these out. It's not hard to do. I appreciate you guys tuning into the channel, truly, and thank you for watching. Hey, and if you found some value in this video and you know some guys who are new to EC135s, spread the word, man. Send the link to the channel so that they could learn some stuff. It doesn't matter who you work for. It doesn't matter if you work for the competitor. No worries. We all want to be safe here and do things the right way. You know what I mean? And be efficient, saving lives. Appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time, all right? Thanks a lot. All right, here's a disclaimer. Read the maintenance manual, all right? I'm not a tech rep. I'm just a random dude. He's worked on these EC135s for a minute. So whatever I say, you need to double check with the maintenance manual. Do what the maintenance manual says. I skipped some steps, and you're not going to want to skip any steps. You're going to do what the maintenance manual says, all right? That being said, let's go.